Hello everyone and welcome back to Economic Survey lecture series. This is lecture number 2nd. In this lecture, we would cover the second chapter of Economic Survey 2022-23. So the name of the topic that we are going to cover is India's medium-term growth outlook with optimism and hope. Before we understand what is the content of this topic and how to cover this topic from Economic Survey, I have a small story for you. This story would help you to understand what this topic is all about. So see guys, let me take you back to your school days. So see, remember you were a kid like this once, and when you used to get ready in the morning, your mom, your dad used to give you lunch box or tiffin for that matter. Now there used to be sandwiches inside this, cookies, etc., chocolates, isn't it? So suppose you are getting ready in the morning for school. The parents are giving us the lunch box or tiffin. We go to school. In the school, we are hyperactive. We attend classes. We have sports period, etc., like this. And then when we feel hungry, we consume the tiffin or lunch. Now life is all sorted, right? Like this. But is the real life that sorted? No, it is not. So life is full of adventure. So let me tell you what the real life looks like. It doesn't look sorted like this. The real life is like this. So you take lunch box, you get ready, you go to school. In the school, you are hyperactive. Sometimes in the school, the child gets injured. The child falls down on the ground. Not a serious injury, but sometimes you fall down on the stairs here and there, right? This is how the childhood is. So for example, this child. See, the child fell down on the stairs and the child is feeling, a little injured. What happens at that time? At that time, people tell the child that, okay, you relax, you have water. And you see that the child feels little weak after injury. So what do you give to the child? The tiffin. Tiffin comes to the rescue. Then you provide tiffin to the child and the child recovers very fast. So see, there is a cycle. The cycle is, you take tiffin in the morning, you go to school, sometimes you get injured. Tiffin doesn't prevent injury. Just because you have tiffin, it doesn't mean that you will never be injured. You will be injured. But because you have tiffin, it means that when you are injured, if you consume tiffin, it will help you to heal very fast because you will have instant energy. That is the job of the tiffin. Why am I telling you the story of mother, child, tiffin, etc., etc.? Because it is connected with something that we are going to study today. It is called as economic reforms. Now let me draw a parallel to real life economic scenario. See what happens. Now imagine that in place of parents, we have government. So in place of mom or dad, suppose there is government. Now this child is the Indian economy, and this tiffin or lunchbox that you see is economic reforms. So what happens? In a normal course of time, when the economy is functioning, what does the government do? The government creates economic reforms for the betterment of the economy. Now the economy starts to function normally, just like they do, right? Normal functioning of the economy, everything is happening. Producers are producing goods and services, consumers are consuming it. But sometimes there are economic shocks. Suppose things have become costly, suppose COVID crisis has happened, etc. So economic shock happens. Now when shock happens, economic reforms necessarily cannot prevent shock all the time. They can prevent some shock, but they cannot prevent all the shocks. But when the economy is in shock, if the government has undertaken the correct economic reforms in time, this negative impact of the shock can be minimized and it can help us to recover very fast. So the revival of the economy becomes very fast. Why? Because the moment there is economic shock, your reform is going to help you to recover and bounce back and become normal again. This is the story which has been told in this topic. So this topic tells us a story that since 1947, when we got independence, so it's been almost 75 years. In these 75 years, the government of India has taken several reforms. But during the process of these reforms, many a times we got economic shocks. Sometimes the magnitude of the economic shock was so huge that it led to temporary problems in the economy. But because the government had already taken reforms, it helps in the economic revival in the medium and long term. So this topic is a story of reforms, economic shocks and revival. That is what this topic tells us. And towards the end, this topic asks a question. Just like in the past, when the government used to take economic reforms, when the economy was moving and we were suffering shocks, we used to come out of shock. Similarly, the government of India is arguing in this chapter that currently also the government of India is undertaking a lot of reforms. The economy is in shock because of global conditions. But once the shocks start to settle down, the economy will revive and bounce back very strongly because of economic reforms, and we are going to attain a good growth in future. That is the message of this topic. So guys, now let us discuss what is the structure of this topic. So see, India's medium-term growth outlook. We are going to divide this topic into three different parts. The first part of this topic will talk about reforms. What are the different reforms that this country has undertaken over a period of time? The second part of this topic is going to discuss the economic shocks. Sometimes the economic shocks, they arise within India. Sometimes the shocks that we face, they are external to India, which means the shock has developed outside India, but it is impacting us also. So this is the shock. And third part of this topic will talk about what is the future prospect for India as a whole. Now, let me quickly take you through different reforms and shocks and what the future holds so that we understand the overall structure. See, in the reform side, between 1950s to 70s, you understand that in India, we were paying more attention to public sector companies. Our growth rate was stuck around 3.5%. That is called Hindu rate of growth. Now, there was no major shock during this time, but between 1980 to 90, we were taking some reforms called as liberalization. I'll explain all these things. Liberalization, some basic reforms were happening. When these reforms were happening, one economic shock happened called as 1990 balance of payment crisis. This shock was so strong that we had to go to IMF to take financial help. When this shock happened, the government of India undertook the first generation reforms in 1991 called as LPG reform, liberalization, privatization and globalization. Now, the government did not stop the reform. The government continued with the reform after 2000 also. So 1991, we started the reform called as first generation reform. Now, in the mid 1990s only, after 1995, we started second generation reforms and it continued. In 2000 to 2002, second and third generation reforms were going on. During this phase, the economy suffered from major crisis between 1998 to 2002. We suffered from shock, both internal and external. This shock was so impactful that because of it, whatever reforms we were undertaking between 2000 to 2002, it did not give us immediate results. In fact, it gave us negative results. Now, slowly over a period of time, the impact of these crises and shock started to become low, right? The impact started to settle down. So between 2003 to 2008, when the impact of this shock started to tone down a little bit, because we had continued the reforms between 2000 to 2002, we did not stop the reforms. Between 2003 and 8, India got the benefits. This is called lagged effect. So for example, if I work hard today, my future will be bright after 5, 6 years or 10 years. This is called lagged effect. We worked very hard between 1991 to 2002. The result started to come around 2003. Now, between 2003 and 8, we got the benefit. Many good things happened in the economy. But again, around 2010, if you see, around 2010 to 2014, there were some problems in the Indian economy. Not a shock exactly, but internal problems like policy paralysis, inflation happened. Because of that, we could not achieve too much of benefits that we wanted. Now, to sort out this problem, policy paralysis and inflation, from 2014 onwards, the government of India has been undertaking new reforms called as reforms for new India. Now, between 2014 to 22, when we started to take the new reforms, we have suffered from crisis, both internal and external crisis like COVID, like Russia-Ukraine war. Now, the government is arguing through this economic survey that look at this period. In 1990s, we suffered from a crisis. In 1991, we took the reforms. 2000, 2002, we took the reforms. But 1998 to 2002 was a crisis. So when we were Suffering from crisis, we continued the reform. The benefit came after some time. So 1998 to 2002, shock, economic shock, but reforms did not stop. So later on, after some time, we got the benefit. Similarly, government is saying exact same thing is happening today. Today, we are having internal and external shock. The government is not stopping the reforms, which means the benefit of reform will not come today. After 2023, we believe that in next 4-5 years, we are going to get the benefits. So in this topic, the government has compared this situation with this situation. This is the whole topic. Now, to show how future will look like, the government of India has argued that future is very bright for us because of these 5 reasons. So, healthy financial system, digital revolution, skill, global supply chain and governance reform. Government says because we are taking these kind of steps, so our future looks very bright. This is the whole topic. So, how are we going to study this topic? We are going to study each of these boxes in detail and see the connection between them. So, guys, let's start the explanation with the first box, 1950s to 70s. So see, when we got independence, the idea of the government of India was to reduce imports to the extent possible because we did not want foreign dependence. To promote domestic manufacturing and reduce import, the government of India wanted to take the help of private sector, but at that time, frankly speaking, private sector was very weak. So the government of India established its own companies called as public sector enterprises. The public sector enterprises were developed so that we can produce goods and services in our own country and our dependence on others starts to come down. Over time, in 50s, 60s and 70s, the dominance of public sector enterprises started to increase. The private sector was very weak and public sector was very strong. The strength of the public sector was so much that the government of India started to call public sector companies as the backbone of the Indian economy, and the public sector companies almost were like monopoly. Monopoly means having total control. They did not have any competition. Like railways, what competition did railway face in India? No competition at that time, right? So this is the situation in 50s, 60s and 70s. During this time, since there was no major breakthrough in the economy, so our rate of growth was around 3.5% and we were stuck in this rate of growth. We were not able to come out of it. This rate of growth and this phase of Indian economy is called as Hindu rate of growth, 3.5%. Now, when we come in the next phase, 1980s to 90s, something interesting started to happen. The government of India realized between 1980s and 1990, so 1980 to 1990, the government of India realized that we are controlling the economy too much. So government of India started to liberalize a little bit. For example, if some factory or industry wants to import raw material or any input from a foreign country, the government of India started to give permissions to them that, okay, you can import raw material and input. Similarly, if I want to start a new business or I want to expand my business, I'm an industrialist, the government of India started to give permissions. Earlier, there was total control through license Raj, but now the government of India started to give more permission to businesses. The government of India also became more liberal in spending money. So what did the government of India do? The government of India started to import a lot of goods from foreign countries. Imports of raw material, imports of oil, etc. These things have started to happen a lot. So guys, when you import a lot and when you don't export, why don't you export? Because you don't manufacture a lot of things. Your economy is not known for manufacturing. So you import a lot, but you don't export a lot. So what will happen? When you import, you spend money. So that leads to deficit. That leads to a problem. So when you spend and you don't earn, this is called as current account deficit. You know, during this phase, 1980 to 1990, the global oil prices were also very high and India was importing the oil, costly oil. So that also led to more deficit. So guys, to import, what do you need? You need foreign exchange reserves. And who keeps foreign exchange reserves in India? RBI. So when we were importing a lot of goods like raw material, oil, etc., what happened? Our forex reserves started to come down. See, forex reserves came down. And our forex reserve came down to the extent that we had this much of forex reserve left, which was only sufficient to finance 2.5 months of import. Why do we need to keep forex reserve? So that if we need to import something, we have some cash in our pocket. But we spent so much of cash that there was nothing left in the pocket, and our import cover was hardly 2.5 months. During this phase, because oil prices were high, etc., inflation was also very high. It reached 13% during 1990 to 1991. This is called as the building of crisis. So when you overspend, you don't produce, you buy costly oil, what happens? Your foundation for crisis is laid. And actually economy suffered from something called as balance of payment crisis. Why? Because this led to balance of payment crisis. To help the economy come out of the crisis, the government of India started a reform called as New Economic Policy, LPG, Liberalization, Privatization, Globalization, or First Generation Reform. What was done under this reform? Two things were done. Number one, macroeconomic stabilization was done. So how do you do macroeconomic stabilization? For example, inflation control, managing your foreign exchange reserves properly, GDP properly, macroeconomic situation. And structural reforms means you take reforms to promote trade, to promote export. These are reforms related to taxation. These are structural reforms. So what did we do actually? For the first time, we were undertaking such big level reforms. What were these reforms? So for example, trade and investment were liberalized. If somebody wanted to invest in India now, so we were more open to it. Earlier, we were putting a lot of restrictions. Similarly, the government of India was more open for trade, export and import both. Earlier, we were saying we will not import a lot, we will promote export, but we were not doing it. Right. But now the government of India was more open, and government of India started to reduce the restriction and said, yes, we are open to both export and import. Public sector enterprise monopoly ended. So government of India said that we are not going to rely only on public sector. We will promote private sector as well. So this is a new reform. Import licensing for imports and capital goods were abolished. So guys, if I have a factory and I want to import any machine or raw material from a foreign country, I had to take license and permission from government of India, and those permissions used to be very difficult. The government of India made it easy and said, now you don't need special permissions, you can import. Import of machine and raw material was not looked as a bad thing now. Automatic approval of FDI. Now this is interesting. See, so suppose guys, somebody wants to come in India and open a factory to manufacture automobile, right? So for example, Mr. Bill Gates wants to come to India and he wants to open a factory to manufacture automobile. Now, to create this factory or this company, 100 crore rupees is required. Earlier, the government of India was saying, no, you won't be allowed to come to India. But after this reform, the government of India started to say that, okay, we will let you come to India and we will let you open this factory, but you can invest only 51 crore, rest 49 crore must be invested by some Indian, which means we started to allow foreign direct investment. What is FDI? FDI means when a foreigner comes to India and they invest in India and they also bring their technology and they come to India basically for long-term investment purposes. That is foreign direct investment. So government allowed up to 51% foreign direct investment, not more than that, which means if a foreigner is coming to India, they can own maximum 51% of a factory or a business enterprise. This started to happen in India. Now, so similarly, the exchange rate before 1991, you understand what is exchange rate? For example, if you want $1, you will have to give away 80 rupees. This is called as exchange rate. How can you exchange one currency with another? Now earlier, the Reserve Bank of India used to control this exchange rate, but now the exchange rate was market determined, which means markets, forces of demand and supply will decide that how many rupees required to buy $1, right? So this was now left to the market. That market will decide it based on forces of demand and supply. Earlier, RBI was deciding all these things. Now, the Reserve Bank of India also, devalued the currency. So our currency was devalued, or the Reserve Bank of India let our rupee depreciate also after 1991. Why? Because when rupee what is the meaning of depreciation? Suppose $1 is equal to 80 rupees. Now, because of forces of demand and supply, suppose $1 becomes 100 rupees. So what has happened? Earlier, if we gave 80 rupees, we got $1, but now we have to give 100 rupees to get $1, which means the value of rupee has come down. When the value of rupee comes down, export becomes cheaper, and it benefits a country, because when your export becomes cheaper, you will be able to sell more. So Reserve Bank of India let our currency depreciate also. They said that let the currency depreciate so that we can export a few things as well. It will help us to get more foreign currency from other countries. That also happened in India. Now there is this last point, full current account convertibility and partial capital account convertibility. This was also one of the reforms. Let me explain what this is. So guys, suppose that I want to travel to USA because I want to study there for let's say my MBA. Now I have rupee in my account, but if I want to study in USA, I have to convert rupee into dollar. So how can I do that? Do I need special permission from RBI? No, because RBI said no, you are allowed to do this. Similarly, when people go abroad for vacation, they convert rupee into dollar. You can do this. This is called as current account transaction. There is no problem in this. Now similarly, suppose I am the manufacturer of this pen in India. I sell this pen to USA. I will get dollars. I can convert dollar into rupee in India. I am totally allowed. This is called current account convertibility, fully allowed in India. What is capital account convertibility? So guys, suppose somebody from USA wants to buy shares or bonds in India, right? So the government of India says, yes, you can buy shares and bonds, but with restriction. Because for example, suppose somebody from USA comes to India and they start to buy all our defense factories. So that's very dangerous for the country. So the government of India said, foreigner can come to India, they can definitely buy shares and bonds, but the government will put restrictions wherever the restriction is required for the good health of the economy. So when somebody wants to invest in our shares, bonds, factories, etc., it is called as capital account convertibility, because when foreigners come here to buy shares and bonds, they will bring dollars, they will convert dollar into rupee. So government of India says we will put some restrictions there. Right, so our capital account convertibility is limited. Our current account convertibility is completely free. This happened after 1991. So guys, because of these reforms, what happened in India? What was the impact of these reforms? Our rate of growth, which was 5.5% in 1980s, so our rate of growth increased to 6.3%. Right. So in 1990s, the rate of growth actually increased. The second thing which happened is our trade to GDP ratio increased from 17.2% to 30.6%. Let me explain to you what is trade to GDP ratio. See, so this ratio is called trade to GDP. So earlier it was 17%. It became suppose 30%. What is the meaning of this? The meaning of this is that suppose guys, the GDP of India is improving, which means our national income is improving. So trade to GDP ratio tells us what is the contribution of trade in improving our GDP. So if our GDP is increasing, is trade also contributing there? So this is what is shown by this ratio. So if this ratio goes on increasing, that means the contribution of trade in our GDP is also increasing, which means India is trading more. So see, earlier this ratio was 17%, now this ratio became 30%. So yes, our economy opened up for export and import. This question was asked in UPSC actually in prelims. They asked what is the meaning of trade openness? See. So trade openness is equal to export plus import by GDP. So trade openness means how open a country is for export and import. So trade openness is equal to export plus import by GDP. And sometimes loosely speaking, we call this as trade to GDP ratio, right? Sometimes it is also referred to as trade to GDP. So in this economic survey, they have used the term trade to GDP ratio in this sense, and they are saying it increased. So now guys, we are going to enter the next phase, which is 2000 to 2002. Remember I told you that between 1950s to 70s, 50, 60, 70 Hindu rate of growth, 80s and 90s, we tried to liberalize, but in the process, crisis happened. In 1991, we took the reforms. Now 1991 reforms continued. In 2000 to 2002 also reforms continued. What are the other reforms that the government did? These reforms are called second and third generation reforms. For example, FDI reforms, telecom reforms, IT boom, public sector enterprises, infrastructure, fiscal policy and banking reforms. These are the reforms that the government undertook between 2000 to 2002. Let us discuss them one by one. So see guys, what happened is around 2000 to 2002, the government of India started to invite more foreigners and tell them that, hey, if you want to invest in Indian companies, please come and invest. Foreign direct investment is becoming more liberal. Earlier, the government was saying, don't come to India, we don't want you. Now government became more friendly and government started to say, if you want to invest in India, if you want to open factories in India, you are welcome. So guys, whenever somebody comes to India and they invest by opening new factories, new businesses, so we don't have to return their money. So suppose Mr. Bill Gates comes to India and he opens a factory to manufacture laptops in India. So it is his investment. India doesn't owe him anything. He comes, he sets up the factory, he sells laptops, he earns income. This is called as non-debt creating investment. So when foreign direct investment comes to India, when somebody opens a factory, we don't owe anything to them. We don't have to return their money. But if somebody comes to India and gives us a loan, and how do people give us loan? When suppose Mr. Bill Gates comes to India and he buys the bonds of Indian companies. So suppose I am Tata Group. I have sold a bond to Mr. Bill Gates. What is the bond? Bond is like a commitment where Tatas will take money from Bill Gates and Tatas will promise Bill Gates that we will return the money with rate of interest. That is called bond. Bond is debt creating. Why? Because when Tatas take money from Mr. Bill Gates through a bond, Tatas have to return it. So it's like a liability. It's like a loan. Loan is called debt. So after 2000, we were, as government of India, we were promoting more non-debt creating kind of loans. Loan, it's not a loan basically. Non-debt creating capital inflow means that money which is coming to India, which we don't have to return. Debt creating, I told you, is for example bonds. When we buy, when Indian companies sell bonds to foreigners, we have to return their money. That is called as external commercial borrowing. So Tata is selling bond in USA, right, to raise money there. So if Tata's raise money from USA, they have to return the money also. That is called external commercial borrowing. So this is like a debt creating activity because Tatas have to return the money. So government of India was not promoting this one. Government of India was promoting non-debt creating capital inflows. And see what is the result? Our FDI increased in India a lot. Now, in the field of infrastructure, guys, see what we did. In the field of infrastructure, for the first time, one of the biggest national highway projects was undertaken in India called as Golden Quadrilateral. See, so the government of India started to create road, a national highway between Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Chennai, Kolkata, and Kolkata to Delhi, and then we started to diagonally connect them also. So this is Golden Quadrilateral because it looks like a quadrilateral. It was one of the biggest road projects in India of around 5,846 kilometers. It was 6th largest in the world at that time and largest in India. You know, when you connect these big places, you are connecting agriculture towns with industrial towns, and cultural connection also develops across India. So big step by the government of India. Now telecom policy, see what happened. After 2000, the government of India introduced, so after 1999, we introduced a policy called as New Telecom Policy in India. What is this New Telecom Policy? Under it, the government of India said that suppose 100 crore rupees is the revenue earned by a telecom company. So suppose the telecom company Airtel is there and their revenue is 100 crore rupees. That's what they have earned this year. The government said a certain percentage of this, for example 10% is 10 crore. So 10 crore will be their license fee. So the government of India created a new license fee formula whereby the government said whatever is the revenue of the telecom companies, a certain percentage will be charged from them called as license fee. Right, so this is a new formula. Now disinvestment. You see, the government of India's disinvestment program started around 1991. So let me tell you the difference between disinvestment, privatization and monetization. It's very important to know. So for example, guys, suppose there is a government company called as Steel Authority of India. This is 100% owned by government. Now government says that this company is not performing that well. So what we can do is let us sell, for example, 49% of this company. Let us sell 49% of this company to private sector, and the government will keep 51%. Right, so who keeps the management? The government keeps the management. So Steel Authority of India, 49% will go to private sector. So private sector is the minority partner here because they are having 49. The government is the majority, so government keeps the management. Guys, this is called as disinvestment, because under disinvestment, the government of India sells a public sector enterprise to a private sector. A part of public sector enterprise is sold. Some assets are sold, right? So this is disinvestment. Now, what is privatization? So now imagine that government of India, instead of selling 49% to private sector, suppose the government of India sells 51% company to private sector and the government of India keeps 49%, right? So government sells 51% to private sector, which means management will also go to private sector, and the government of India keeps 49%. Now, here the official control and ownership, majority of it goes in the private sector's hand, which means all the important decisions will be taken by private sector. So guys, this is an example of partial privatization. Partial privatization. This is also called as strategic disinvestment. Why? Because when the government of India has to sell 51% government company to a private sector, the government strategically selects a private partner which suits us, and then the government of India sells 51% public company to the private sector, who takes care of management and ownership both. This is called as partial privatization. You can also call it as strategic disinvestment, because 100% company has not been sold. Now, what is full privatization? Under full privatization, complete privatization, private sector gets 100% company and the government keeps 0%. This is complete privatization. This is partial privatization. In case of Air India, this has happened. Complete full privatization has happened. Now, there is something called as monetization. What is the meaning of monetization? Let me explain that to you. So, for example, guys, suppose there is this government of India's company. This government of India's company has a warehouse. Warehouse means godown, right? This godown is there. The government of India, suppose this is Steel Authority of India, and they have a godown, and they are currently not using the godown, right? They are not using it, this surplus extra. So Steel Authority of India can put this godown on rent to somebody. Suppose they rent it out to Tata's private sector. So this godown has been put on rent, let's say for 20 years, which means for 20 years Tata's will use it and pay rent to Steel Authority of India. This is called as monetization. Monetization means when you take your property and you put it on, for example, rent, because now Steel Authority of India is going to get cash from Tata's. So this is monetization. So the difference between disinvestment, privatization and monetization is that under monetization, you take some property, put it on rent, and the property comes back to you after some time. Under privatization, whatever you sold to private sector becomes the majority owner and controller of the company. Now, under disinvestment, generally, Government of India prefers to keep the ownership and management in its own hand. So they sell only a small part of the company to private sector. Under privatization, they sell a bigger part, like 51% or more. So in India, what happened is around 2000 onwards, the government of India started the disinvestment program in a different way. Disinvestment was going on since 91, but since 2000, Ministry of Disinvestment was created first of all, to make the process better. Then Ministry of Disinvestment was merged with Ministry of Finance. So Ministry of Finance became very strong. Now after 2000, we started strategic disinvestment most of the time, and privatization was also done. And some of the examples of strategic disinvestment and privatization, Maruti Udyog, Hindustan Zinc, etc. So these things were privatized these companies were privatized at that time. So in disinvestment, before 2000, the policy followed in India was different. Before 2000, what was the government of India doing? before 2000, suppose there is a public sector enterprise, the government of India used to sell 49% to private sector and government used to keep 51%. This is called as minority disinvestment because private sector got the minority part of the company. This used to happen before 1999. Before 2000, this used to happen. But after 2000, the government started a strategic disinvestment where 51%, etc., or 100% company was sold to private sector. So strategic disinvestment after 2000. Now, let's come to fiscal policy, guys. You know that one of the problematic areas for government of India has been that the government always overspends. So the government of India said that we are going to control that habit, and Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act 2003 was passed, under which it was told that the center and the state have to control their borrowings and overspending. So a limit was given to them. For example, it was told to them that you cannot spend more than 3% of your GDP, etc. Borrowing cannot exceed more than 3 or 3.5%. So FRBM Act was passed to make them disciplined. When this act was passed, you see our fiscal deficit started to come down. So a good positive impact happened. Now, banking reforms were also undertaken. So, before 2000, the Reserve Bank of India used to control all the interest rate. For example, guys, when you deposit money in the savings account, so banks give you savings interest rate. All these things were earlier controlled by RBI. But after 2000, the RBI started to deregulate the interest rate, which means RBI said, banks, you can control your own interest rate. Right. So when the bank interest rates are decontrolled, banks are allowed to change the interest rate based on market demand and supply. Competition among the banks improves. For example, if I want to take home loan, I can go to one bank and see home loan rate is 9%, another bank 8.5%. So I will prefer 8.5. Competition improved between the banks and the customers also, the borrowers also, they got more choices. So interest rate deregulation. Sarfazi Act 2002 was passed. I'll tell you what this is. So guys, suppose that I have to start a business. So I go to State Bank of India and take loan. State Bank of India says, give some property paper. So I give my property paper and I take loan. When I take loan from State Bank of India by giving my property papers, I promise them that I will pay my EMIs to them. I will pay them interest rate. But suppose I'm not able to do it, right? My business is not doing well. So in that case, what will State Bank of India do? Sarfazi Act was passed so that State Bank of India can directly come, take my property, the property which I have put as collateral, and recover its money without going to court. So this was Sarfazi Act which was passed. It helped the banks and financial institutions to recover their money. Now, you see, when Sarfazi Act was passed and interest rate deregulation happened, you can see something interesting. The bank credit improved in the economy. What is the meaning of bank credit? So when banks give more loans to people, when people take more home loan, education loan, loans to buy TV, fridge, etc. When business community takes more loan for investment, so we say that credit has increased in the economy. So see, increased credit flow in the economy because of reforms. So guys, when these things happen in the economy, see, what are we doing? We are doing this phase. See. So we just did this phase whereby we studied that during 2000 to 2002, what are the different types of reforms that were undertaken. So what did we do so far? We did 1980 to 90 liberalization. Then we did crisis, and then we did LPG reforms, and then now we are doing that the reforms continued between 2000 and 2002. This is second and third generation reform. But here comes the problem. When we were undertaking these reforms in 2000 to 2002, parallelly from 1998 to 2002, some economic shocks was experienced by India. We are going to study those shocks, and these shocks were so strong that it destroyed our foundation of the economic reforms. It overshadowed the economic reforms for quite some time. So we are going to study what shocks were experienced by India at that time. So guys, what are the different shocks that India experienced at that time? You see, in 1998, we conducted our nuclear test, right? So when we conducted our nuclear test, entire world imposed sanctions on us, economic sanctions. Because of economic sanctions, it was very difficult for us to get foreign direct investment. Now, investment was drying up. Nobody wanted to come to India for investment purposes. Number two, during this phase only, after 2000, we experienced two droughts. Droughts create a problem because it's both financial loss of lives. So drought also create a problem. And there was something called as dot-com bubble. I'll explain what dot-com bubble is. Guys, during this period 1999, 2000, etc., some big internet companies created so much of hope in the world. I'll tell you what happened. During 1999 to 2000, there was this revolution in the field of IT. Everybody started to say that these companies, new companies related to information technology, software, etc., whosoever is coming, they are the future. So people started to invest a lot in them. So suppose guys, there is a company, new company, which is creating softwares. Everybody in the world said that this is the phase of IT. Now only IT will be popular in the world. So everybody started to buy their shares. When people buy the shares and demand the shares a lot, the share price goes up. So the share price of this company started to go up and up, because everybody wanted to buy the share and people were speculating that the share price will rise more. So everybody used to jump on and buy the shares. When everybody is buying the share thinking that this company will do well, there is a limit up to which the company can do well, right? Because there is a limit of everything in life. But people are crazily buying the shares thinking that this company will be the best in the world. So everybody was buying IT shares. So what happened? Speculation happened that this company will do well, but reality is different. In reality, the companies only have a limit up to which they can perform. So when the expectation was not fulfilled in terms of profit, people started to say these are useless companies, and everybody now wanted to sell the shares. Earlier, everybody wanted to buy the shares because they said these shares will make us rich. Now everybody wants to sell the share because they are saying these are useless shares. So what happens? Earlier there was a speculation, there was bubble, and then the bubble burst. Now when the bubble bursts, what happens? Share markets go down. The banks, the money that the banks have also invested here, that also is gone. It takes a hit. Plus September 9/11 attacks also happened. Those terrorist attacks on USA, the World Trade Center, that also happened during this time. So this phase was actually a phase of economic shocks. So what is the result of all this? September 9 attacks, dot-com bubble, plus economic sanctions on India and droughts in India. So what happened is our FDI started to come down. Foreign direct investment started to come down. And we suffered something which is undesirable. So in 1991, we undertook reforms. But in 1998 to 2000, we suffered a shock. This shock was so humongous that it nullified the positive impact of our reforms. This is the problem that it created. So the government of India says that the story doesn't stop there. The government of India says that, see, in 1991, we undertook reform. 2000 to 2002, we undertook reform. This reform was undertaken, but shock was there. Now, when this shock was there, the positive impact of the reform was nullified. But when the shock's impact started to come down a little bit, around 2003 to 2008, when the entire world was recovering, India recovered faster because we had undertaken a lot of reform. So the reforms gave us lagged effect. What is the meaning of lagged effect? Lagged effect means we took the reform between 2000 to 2002. It started to help us after 2-3 years. It made us better. So now guys, we are going to study what happened between 2003 to 2008 and how India benefited. See. So guys, between 2003 to 2008, India participated in the global bloom. Let me explain this. See, between 2003 to 8, India experienced some positive factors like better corporate performance because we had undertaken those reforms previously. So our corporate performance started to be better. Conducive investment climate because government of India had opened up the economy and said, if any foreigner wants to come to India, we welcome you. Positive sentiment for India as preferred investment destination because government support was there to foreign investors. Encourage global liquidity condition or interest rate. The interest rate across the world compared to India was low. Indian interest rate was slightly higher. So everybody wanted to invest in India because when the interest rates are slightly higher, so investors make more profit. Because of these reasons, you see what happened in India. Because of these reasons, between 2003 to 2008, look at the increase in FDI again. FDI started to increase in India. Here the FDI was coming down. Now the FDI started to increase more. Now, and we understand it from the fact that if you look at the period between 2003 to 2008, the global growth was 4.8%. The rate of growth of GDP in the world was 4.8%, whereas the Indian growth was 8%. World was growing at 4.8, India was growing at 8%, and one of the biggest contribution in this was FDI. So because of that, we could bounce back. And why did FDI come to India? Because we created the foundation between 1991 to 2003. Even if we suffered some sort of crisis in between, the nuclear test, etc., we did not stop the reform that benefited us, right? So the government of India is saying that this period, 2003 to 8 was good for India, despite the fact that there was shock recently because the government had undertaken a lot of reforms. Now guys, when we enter the phase of 2010 to 14, let us see what happened in 2010 to 14. Around 2010 to 14, most of the projects in India did not get government approvals. So sometimes because of Ministry of Environment, sometimes because of legalities, some or the other reasons were there that most of the investment projects in India were stuck. And our investors and business community was not getting permissions to implement those projects. Because of that, our GDP, our investment started to come down. In fact, globally they say that the period between 2010 to 14 in India was a period of policy paralysis, which means because we were little lethargic in giving permissions for investment, etc., our GDP could not go to the extent that we wanted. Now, 2010 to 14 is also the period when we had double-digit inflation. Inflation used to be so high in India that our repo rate was increased 12 to 13 times. So there were two problems. There was no good policy in terms of investment and in this phase, and second, inflation was very high. Plus a lot of corruption scandals also came in public, which reduced the investor confidence. So these things were building up in India, and the effect was actually coming up on our growth, GDP numbers. So the government of India says that this 2010 to 14 was not a bright period. Now, since 2014, the government says that they started to take policies to reform the Indian economy, to attract more foreign investment, to increase domestic investment also. When we started to take more reforms from 2014 to 22, so the government of India says, exactly during this period, we suffered many shocks. But the government says, since our reforms are so strong, which we started in 2014, that whatever shocks are happening now, we will be able to surpass and overcome those shocks, and our future is bright. So guys, I am going to tell you what happened in India between 2014 to 2020. What kind of reforms were undertaken? So guys, we can divide the reforms after 2014 to 2022 in four categories. So four different types of reforms were undertaken. And what does the government of India call them? The government of India says that these reforms are new approach to help the economy grow. So these are called as new kind of reforms. And what is the slogan of the government of India for these reforms? Government says these are the reforms which are based on the principle of sabka saath, sabka vikaas, which means that everybody will be a partner in our development process so that everybody gets the benefit. So which means that we are trying to promote inclusive growth and development model. So guys, what are the four principles based on which our reforms have been designed after 2014? The first principle is create more public goods. Right? Public goods means goods which are meant for public consumption and public use, like roads, airport, mobile app, UPI for digital payment. These are public goods. So government of India says this is the first principle of our growth. Second principle is trust-based governance. So for example, government of India says that earlier, if I am a company, I used to make losses and I did not know what to do. So earlier, I was called as a criminal in the economy, that you are suffering from losses, you have used the bank's money, you are firing your workers. Now Government of India says, we will not call you criminals, we will help you to recover. And if you are unable to recover, we will help you to leave the industry in honorable manner, which means we will help you to shut down your business with honor and dignity. So the government is trying to build the trust between people, government and business community. So that's the second principle. Third is, public-private partnership. So for example, we require huge amount of railway stations, airport, seaport, roads, etc. Government alone cannot provide all these things. So we are trying to create more partnership between government and private sector to create more infrastructure in this country. This is public-private partnership. And then agricultural productivity. So guys, if we do not increase productivity of land through mechanization or by helping the farmers, then even though India is an agricultural country, but our farming community will remain poor. There is already a problem of poverty and disguised unemployment. One of the ways to overcome is to improve productivity, which means a small piece of land should give us more output. That is called productivity. Government is saying that this is the fourth principle. So based on these four principles, we are trying to do two things: ease of business, doing business, and ease of living, which means on one hand the government is trying to make the life of businessman easy, on the other hand the government is trying to make the life of people easy. These two things together will lead to efficient resource allocation in India, and this will enhance the growth potential of the economy. So let us study these four things one by one. These are called four principles of economic reforms. So guys, we are going to study the first pillar of the new reforms. It is called as creating public goods to enhance opportunities, efficiency and ease of living. What are the different ways in which the government of India is creating public goods? The first is physical infrastructure, the second is digital infrastructure, and third is called as ease of doing business. These are the three ways in which the government of India is trying to create public goods. Let us start with the first one, called as physical infrastructure. Now under it guys, you can see that we have mentioned golden quadrilateral. Remember I told you that it's around 6,000 kilometers road which connects Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai and Kolkata. Now this was the first big project undertaken in India. After that we have started some beautiful projects related to infrastructure. First of all, we have started National Infrastructure Pipeline. So I'll tell you what is the beauty of this. The government of India realized that if we want to become a $5 trillion economy, the government of India has to construct a lot of infrastructure. A list of infrastructure was compiled by the government of India. It contains roughly 9,000 infrastructure projects that we want to construct. And the total cost of these 9,000 infrastructure projects will be 111 lakh crores. This will be the investment that is required in India to construct roughly 9,000, in fact more than 9,000. Currently, there are roughly around 10,000 infrastructure projects that we want to construct. So all these more than 9,000 infrastructure projects that we want to construct, it requires investment of 111 lakh crores. So this scheme by Government of India under which we are trying to construct the infrastructure is National Infrastructure Pipeline. Under it we are going to construct everything starting from airport, railway station, seaport, bus stops, everything. Now there is National Monetization Pipeline. Remember I told you the meaning of monetization some time back, that if I have a place I can put it on rent and I can get money. Similarly, the government of India gives airport, railway stations, etc. to the private sector for repair and maintenance. For example, Lucknow, Jaipur, Ahmedabad, Guwahati, all these airports have been given to private sector for maintenance for 30 years or more than 30 years. In that duration, the private sector takes care of our airports and they keep giving money to the government of India. They also make profit, government also makes profit. This is called National Monetization Pipeline. So government of India is planning to collect roughly around 6 lakh crores by monetizing our assets. Monetizing means government of India's property is going to give cash to the government. If you give your property to private sector for a temporary period, lease period of 30 years, private sector will also earn money, government will also earn money. Government is planning to earn roughly around 6 lakh crore through National Monetization Pipeline. This 6 lakh crore by government will be used to construct new infrastructure in this country. Now similarly guys, the government of India has started this Bharat Mala program in the year 2017. Here the government of India wanted to construct roughly 35,000 kilometers of roads in India, national highway, expressway, economic corridors. So this was a program called Bharatmala. And under Bharatmala, the government is expecting to complete 35,000 kilometer road, plus under the new Bharatmala phase, we have increased it to 40,000 kilometers. Bharatmala. Sagarmala means under Sagarmala, the government of India wants to develop the seaports of India. Two things are being done under Sagarmala. One, the government of India is modernizing the existing seaports, and the government of India is constructing new seaports. Plus, around the seaport, the government of India is developing basic industries also. So suppose there is a seaport here. This is our seaport. Around the seaport, the government of India is developing basic industries like food processing industry, furniture industry, paper industry. It is being done under Sagarmala. So this is physical infrastructure. So if somebody will ask you that what are the big programs of infrastructure in India, we can say National Infrastructure Pipeline, Monetization Pipeline, Bharatmala, Sagarmala. Now, digital infrastructure. So see, the government of India long time back started a program called as JAM Trinity. What is JAM Trinity? Jandhan, Aadhaar and mobile. These three things were being used to improve financial inclusion in India. So for example, the government was motivating people to open Jandhan accounts. Now, if you see what is the effect of JAM Trinity, Jandhan, Aadhaar and mobile in 2015, so roughly 53% people had bank account. In 2019, it increased to 78%. So big jump in the people having bank accounts. Similarly, when you go to a bank, you want to open an account, they will do something called as Know Your Customer. KYC protocols are there. They will ask for your identity card, address proof, etc. These things are being done digitally now, right? So you don't need to physically do these things. These things will be digitally done, called as eKYC. Similarly, the government of India is promoting digital signatures also in documents. And similarly, UPI system has been introduced by government for digital payment. And the government of India has also started to use GST in India, goods and services tax, which is mostly, maintained digitally. So if you want to pay your taxes, GST, you can go to the GST portal, pay your taxes. Everything is digital. In fact, if you look at the number of taxpayers in the year 2014, those people who were paying business taxes, there were 70 lakh people. Currently under GST, how many taxpayers are there? Roughly 1.4 crore people are there who are paying their GST. So from 70 lakhs, we have become 1.4 crore GST payers currently. So huge jump in the number of people. Now, similarly, guys, there was one problem in India that most of the MSMEs, micro, small and medium enterprises that we have in India, they were not registered with the government of India. So we were not able to know how many MSMEs are there, how they are doing. So government of India made the registration process easy and started a portal called as Udyam portal in 2020. Under Udyam portal, so far 1.27 crore MSMEs have registered themselves. So now we have a data which helps us to take more benefits to the MSMEs through the registration process. So if we have registered MSMEs, we can give more loan to them, we can help them if we want, because now we have the data. Similarly, guys, there are many street vendors in India who wanted small sum of money to run their business. Government of India started a scheme called as Swanidhi scheme for them. Under it, the street vendors could take 10,000 rupees fund capital to run their business. So how many street vendors have availed this 10,000 rupees fund as the first loan under the scheme? 32 lakh street vendors have taken this loan at low rate of interest. No collateral is required. If you want to take 10,000 rupees loan, no collateral is required. And how many street vendors have taken the loan for the second time? 20,000 rupees. More than 7 lakh street vendors have availed this loan for the second time also, which means this loan is actually helping them. Similarly, guys, the government of India is also promoting ease of doing business. How are they doing that? So see, there is something called as National Single Window Clearance System. What is this? So suppose I want to start a business. I want environmental clearances. I want clearance related to, let's say, a municipality, related to my property, right? So there are so many permissions and no objection certificates I need from different department of the government. Now, through National Single Window Clearance System, I can apply for all these clearances at one government portal or one mobile app, and I will get all the clearances and certificates, which will be digitally stored for me also. So there is a digital storage facility where it will be digitally stored. So online permissions are given, digitally stored. That is National Single Window Clearance System. There is a program called as PM Gati Shakti that has also been started by government. What is Gati Shakti? I'll give you an example. So for example, suppose guys, I stay in a locality where there is a beautiful road. Now after some time, somebody comes and start to dig the road. And if I ask them that why are you digging the road, they will say that, sir, we are putting a gas pipeline, or we are putting, let's say that internet cable connection is being put, right? So optical fibers are being laid. And if we tell them that why did you dig the road, you could have put the gas pipeline or internet cables before the road was being constructed, you could have put it there. So they will tell us that there is no coordination between different departments of the government. So the government of India has said that all the departments of the government who are busy in the field of infrastructure, who have the responsibility to give infrastructure to this country, all the government departments have to upload their past, present and future data related to their project on the portal called as Gati Shakti portal. It improves coordination between different government departments, so that if somebody has to put a gas pipeline, they can contact Ministry of Road and Transportation and they can coordinate. It will save public money. So this scheme is there. Similarly, guys, if you want to avail any government services like passport, driving license, whatever is there, there are many government services which you can avail through one mobile app called as Umang app. Umang app has almost more than 1200 government services that you can take through one mobile app. Similarly, the government of India wants to provide social security benefits and help to unorganized sector. But if I belong to unorganized sector, government does not have my data. How does the government get the data? So the government has started a portal called as e-Shram portal. Under e-Shram portal, the government is collecting the data of all the unorganized workers who are not working in organized sector, so that in future when we have the data, if government wants to give them social security benefits, health benefits, etc., through this e-Shram portal, we can look at the data and start to give them benefits. So guys, these are the reforms which have happened in the field of public goods. Now we are going to the second principle of reforms that are happening. It is called trust-based governance. So under trust-based governance, guys, the government of India is trying to improve the trust between government, citizen and businesses. So how is the government trying to improve the trust? To improve the trust, the government of India has introduced reforms like Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. Second, RERA, Real Estate Regulation Act 2016. The government of India has also made changes in Companies Act that we will study. The government of India has made changes related to taxation and easy compliances. So these are the things we are going to cover. These will improve the trust between government, citizen and businesses. So we will start with Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. So guys, to explain the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, I'm going to give you a situation. Let's discuss that. So for example, suppose that I am a company which manufactures chocolates. Now to carry on my business, I needed cash. You are a bank. So I came to you and I said that, can you give me cash as a loan? So you are the creditor, I am the debtor. Debtor means those who take loan. Creditor means those who provide capital or finance. I promised you that I will return your cash after, let's say, 1 year, 2 years, along with rate of interest. But I'm not able to do that. And I have said that, sorry, I can't return your cash. And how much cash did I take? Suppose 1 crore rupees. Now, the government of India has started a system called as Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, under which, first of all, the government of India would try to make sure that this company, the chocolate company, can be saved. If for some reason I am not able to make profit, etc., they will try to sort it out and they will try to change the management, etc., to save the company. If at all they cannot save the company, then the government of India is going to sell my properties, my machines, my factory, my land and return the money of the bank. This is called as resolution, right? So first of all, the target is to save the company. If you cannot be saved, then the government will sell your assets. What is this actual process? This process is guided by Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016. What happens here, guys? See. So suppose there is a company which takes loan, minimum 1 crore rupees. This is the new amount which has been decided. It can change. But currently, let's say that minimum 1 crore is the amount. If you have defaulted, means I am a company, I am unable to return my 1 crore rupees to a bank, then either the creditor, means you, the bank, or debtor means the company which took the loan, either of them can go to insolvency and bankruptcy, and they can say that please help us to solve the problem. So we can apply for insolvency, either creditor or debtor. Now, how does the process begin? So once you apply for insolvency, you have to see under which category you fall. Are you a corporate enterprise, or are you a partnership company, or you are an individual? If you are a corporate, then you will have to go to an adjudicating authority, which means the authority which makes all the decisions regarding insolvency. The name of the authority is National Company Law Tribunal, NCLT. And if you are partnership or individual type of business, then your adjudicating authority will be Debt Recovery Tribunal, DRT. Right? So these two are the adjudicating authority, which means they are the ones who take all the decisions regarding insolvency. So what is the job of the adjudicating authority? This authority, once you tell them that I am corporate or individual, so they will now appoint an interim insolvency professional. Now, what is the job of interim insolvency professional? The job of interim insolvency professional is that the moment the adjudicating authority appoints them, they control the company now. They control all the business, the properties, everything of the company. Now, so all the assets are under them. Now the adjudicating authority also appoints insolvency professional. And what is the job of the insolvency professional? Till the time insolvency process is going on, which means how to settle the dispute between the bank and the company, till this is going on, who runs the business? Insolvency professional. Who controls the property of the business? So insolvency professional would run the business, and property will be controlled by interim insolvency professional. Now, interim insolvency professional would also provide help in establishing something called as committee of creditors. Now, what does the committee of creditor do? A committee of creditor would decide whether the company can be saved or the properties of company should be sold. They are the ones who will make this decision, right? And this is created with the help of interim insolvency professional, because they control the property. So they make an assessment of whether the company can be saved, and committee of creditor would take the final call. And what is the job of insolvency professional? To run the company during the process of insolvency. This is how the insolvency process is carried out. Now, this is an honorable way for a company to exit business. Similarly, guys, the government of India took another reform called Real Estate Regulation Act. So you remember earlier what used to happen? If you want to buy a property, you used to go to a builder, real estate agents. The real estate agents or dealers are not registered. They used to take us to the builders. The builders used to charge anything from us, no standard rates. They used to say that we will give you your apartment in 1 year. They used to take 5 years, no compensation. There used to be a lot of problems there. They used to say that there will be 3 bedrooms in the house and there used to be 2 bedrooms. Where will you go for all this? If you go to courts, it will take you years to resolve the problem. So the government of India has started this Real Estate Regulation Act, under which the government is trying to make the real estate more transparent. So now the agents, property dealers and the builders, everybody is registered under RERA. Now under RERA, government is trying to protect the consumer by making the sector more transparent. The government is also trying to help the builders. Why? Because now builders will be registered, and suppose you want to construct a building, you will have to take so many permissions. All the permissions will be given through RERA, through single window clearance. So it's good for the builders also, because they get single window clearance permissions. It's good for the customers also, because whatever is promised to us by the builder, that will be delivered. If not, we will file a complaint under RERA. That's also good. Now, minor offenses. See guys, suppose I am a company. I have to file my tax returns this month, but because of carelessness, etc., or because of genuine reasons, I was not able to pay my taxes. Because some economic crisis is happening, some sort of problem is there in my business, I am not able to pay my taxes. I have delayed. I have not delayed the tax payment intentionally. I have delayed it because I am suffering from some problem. So which means I am not a habitual criminal or offender in this case. So why should FIR be laws against me? Or maybe sometimes paperwork is wrong, sometimes some entry is wrong, right? So sometimes innocent mistakes also happen on the part of the company. So the government of India says, if the companies make innocent mistakes or they are not doing anything criminal, why to call them criminal? So the government of India has said that all these offenses can be settled outside the court also, no need to go to court. So the government has decriminalized many of such offenses which were earlier called as criminal offenses. Now they are called civil offenses and they are decided outside the court only. 1400 such cases have been sorted out without resorting to court. Similarly, guys, in the field of taxation, the government of India has done GST reform. See, the benefit of GST is not only that government will get more tax revenue, but those companies which opt for GST, they also become organized in the sense they register themselves under GST. So the government has all the data of the company, which means now the company will have to give social security benefit to workers because the government is keeping an eye over them, right? Their product quality can also be checked. So GST has helped to make the economy more formal and organized. Similarly, the government of India has reduced the corporate taxes. And guys, there is something called as sovereign wealth fund. I'll tell you what it is. If you go to country like China, USA, etc., if you ask their central banks, you will come to know that they have huge forex reserves. They have a lot of money with their central bank. So what they do is they invest that money in countries like India. So from, let's say, US, UK, these countries which have a lot of foreign exchange reserves, they invest that money in Indian infrastructure. Because when they invest the money in our infrastructure projects, they also make profit. Government of India says if a sovereign wealth fund or pension funds, they want to invest in our infrastructure projects and they make profit, Government of India does not collect taxes from them. Why does the government do it? So as to promote more investment in our infrastructure. So that is also tax benefit is there. Now there is something called tax buoyancy. What is the meaning of tax buoyancy, guys? The meaning of tax buoyancy is that as the economy grows, as the GDP of India is growing, the tax collection should also grow. And the government of India need not increase the tax rate. So whenever the tax revenue of a country grows as GDP grows, see, this is called as tax buoyancy. Tax buoyancy means as GDP improves, tax revenue should improve without increasing the tax rate. So has it happened in India? Of course, yes, because now things have become digital. So government of India is keeping an eye over the people whether they have filed their tax returns or not. So number of people filing tax returns has increased. So our tax buoyancy is going up without changing the tax rate also. Plus, there is something interesting which is happening in India. Two interesting things have happened. Faceless tax assessment. So now when the tax officials have to see whether we are paying our taxes or not, every data is present digitally. They can do the assessment and review without meeting us. Earlier, they had to meet us, look at our files. Now everything is digital. So digital tax assessment, faceless tax assessment is happening, number one. Number two, when digital taxes are paid, there are so many places where the government of India can check whether we have paid the taxes or not. Our bank account is there. Now GST portal is there. So many places where government can cross-check if we have paid taxes or not, which means through these methods, the tax collection has improved without increasing tax rate also. This is called tax reforms. Now, another thing that has happened is easy compliances. So guys, if I am a company or a businessman, and if I'm running a business, I have to fulfill so many government no objection certificates, so many permissions have to be taken, which are not even required. So for example, if I have a chocolate factory and I have to take permission from Ministry of Defense, there is no connection. So Government of India said all those things which are redundant and currently not required. 25,000 such requirements have been repealed, and 1400 laws have been removed from India because they were not required in the present times. This increased the confidence between government, citizens and business community. So guys, this was the second pillar of the reform, second principle of the reforms that the government is taking. Now we are going to the third principle or third pillar of the reform, which is to promote private sector as co-partner in development. So Government of India is trying very hard to increase public-private partnership in our development program. How? See guys, you know what Government of India did. So I'm going to show you this. So the Government of India started a program called as Make in India. Under Make in India, the Government of India took 25 sectors like defense, food processing industry, leather, textile, all these things. 25 sectors were taken. Here, the government of India calls them as high focus sectors. The government of India said that in these sectors, the government of India is going to extend every help possible. If they require electricity, if they require roads, warehouses, everything will be given to them so that these sectors can attract more investment and India's manufacturing can improve. Then the government of India increased the number of sectors to 27 and the government of India calls it as Make in India 2.0. These 27 sectors include both manufacturing and services sector. Around 15 manufacturing and 12 services sectors are covered under Make in India 2.0, which we are trying to promote. So a list of 27 high focus sectors have been made. The government of India wants to promote both domestic plus foreign investment in these sectors. To bring more foreign investment in these sectors, the government has put most of these sectors under automatic route of foreign direct investment. What is automatic route? Automatic route means if a foreigner wants to invest in our food processing industry or telecom industry, they can come to India directly without any kind of hassle or without any roadblock. That is automatic route. They don't need to take prior government permission. They can directly come invest and inform the government of India. So most of the sectors have been put under automatic route and 100% foreign direct investment is allowed. If they want to create a factory here, they can directly create a factory. This has been allowed in India. Now, when the government of India was doing it, government of India realized that many of our industries, they can become global industries, but they do not have the cash and they do not have good machines and technology. So government started to give cash to our industries so that our industries can buy better quality inputs, better quality machines and increase the investment. For example, Indian electronics industry. Now, Indian electronics industry wanted to be the best in the world, but we did not have the right technology, right skill. So government of India started to give cash to these industries around 2020. In this year, the government of India started to give cash to them and told them, use this cash to buy better inputs, buy better machines and become a global industry. So our pharmaceutical industry, medicine, medical equipment, electronic, food processing industry, textile industry, all these industries, automobile industry, they are getting cash from the government to become global players, to become global champions. This scheme under which we are trying to create global players within India is called as production linked incentive scheme. So Make in India is trying to benefit 27 sectors, but production linked incentive scheme is focusing on 14 sectors of India. In these 14 sectors, we want to become global champions, which means we want to become global supplier of these things like electronics, food processing industry. So another scheme called production linked incentive scheme has been started. What is the result of all this? If you put more sectors under automatic route of foreign investment, so earlier, if you do these kind of things, then the amount of FDI that is coming to India, so look at this ratio, foreign direct investment is to GDP, this ratio is over a period of time increasing in India. Let me share the data with you. That if this economic survey says that around 2004-05 to 2013-14, the ratio of foreign direct investment to GDP was 2.2%. Now this ratio has increased to 2.6%, which means the contribution of, see, what is this ratio? Foreign direct investment by GDP. This is the ratio. What is the meaning of this ratio? The meaning of this ratio is the contribution of FDI in our GDP is increasing, which means foreign direct investment is contributing more and more in our growth now. So this is what is being said. And I have already taught you that under Make in India, currently 27 high focus sectors under Make in India 2.0. And under production linked incentive scheme, the government is helping 14 selected sectors by giving them cash. And what is the total cash government is giving them? Roughly around 2 lakh crore rupees, so that they can become global players. What is the government of India doing for MSMEs? See, for MSMEs, the government of India has started emergency credit line guarantee scheme. This I taught you in the first lecture of economic survey, and roughly 1.14 crore MSMEs have availed 2.38 lakh crore rupees. So under this, the government of India says that if you are an MSME and you need cash or credit because you were affected by COVID, you can take loans from the government of India. Emergency credit line. Now, this provides collateral-free loan, right? We have discussed this point already in the first economic survey video. Now, the second system that the government started for MSMEs is called Trade Receivable Discounting System, TRDS. Now, what is this system? Let me explain. So, guys, suppose this is MSME. This MSME is the seller. Suppose they are selling a digital pen. So, they are the seller. They are selling the digital pen to a buyer. The price of this digital pen is 10,000 rupees. So, it has been sold. The buyer is supposed to pay 10,000 rupees to MSME. But the buyer tells the MSME that I will make the payment after a week. So, a piece of paper called invoice is generated where this amount is mentioned. And the MSME is supposed to collect it from the buyer after 1 week. But suppose MSME requires fund. MSME can go to a portal called TREDS portal. On this portal, there will be many banks and financial institutions, and they will offer cash to the MSME, and the financial institutions will collect this invoice. So these financial institutions will buy invoice and they will give cash to the MSME. Now, MSME gets instant cash, and after 1 week, those banks or financial institution which buy the invoice, they can go to this buyer and they can claim the cash. Why are banks participating in financial institution? Because suppose the value of invoice is 10,000 rupees, but since MSME requires instant cash, suppose they are ready to sell this for 9,990 rupees only. So, what are the banks going to do? Banks will collect 10,000 rupees from the buyer, but banks have given only 9,990 rupees. So 10 rupees is the profit of the bank. For that small profit, they have also participated, right? But the amount is in crores, so the profit margin is also good. So this helps the MSMEs to collect quick payments. Now, let's see what has the government of India done in terms of disinvestment under the new policy. The government of India has said that they are going to follow a new policy of disinvestment. I'm going to explain to you what is India's new policy of disinvestment. See, the government of India has divided Indian economy into two parts. One is called strategic sector and another is called as non-strategic sector. Now, what is the meaning of strategic sector? Those sectors which are of national importance. For example, defense, national security, critical infrastructure, right, banking, right, or finance. These things are called as strategic sectors. In a strategic sector, the government of India has said that they will be present in these sectors through public sector enterprises, which means government of India will definitely be there. But the government said we will also allow private sector to exist with us. So for example, Tata's would also manufacture missiles in India, government will also manufacture missiles. Both government and private sector will exist. But then there are non-strategic sector. Government says these sectors are, for example, not that important. So the government says in non-strategic sector, only private sector will exist, which means public sector enterprises will not exist. So for example, if digital pen has to be manufactured, that's not strategic. Government says, why should government manufacture this? So here it will be non-strategic and government of India will not exist here, only private sector will exist. But in strategic sectors, there will definitely be public sector companies plus both private sector companies. But in non-strategic sector, only private companies. This is our new policy. Now, in the field of infrastructure, I already told you that NIP, NMP, PM Gati Shakti and National Logistics Policy. Government of India has just started a National Logistics Policy. Why? I'll give you an example. Suppose a digital pen is manufactured in Andhra and this digital pen has to be sold in Arunachal Pradesh. The price of this digital pen in Andhra is 10,000 rupees, but because of transportation charges, courier charges, packaging charges, this digital pen becomes 15,000 rupees in Arunachal Pradesh. Government of India wants to reduce this charge. that when somebody is something is transported in different parts of India. So suppose you are taking a digital pen from Andhra and selling it in Arunachal Pradesh, cost of transportation, storage, packaging should not become that high that price should increase. So government of India is trying to reduce the cost of packaging, transportation, storage, called as logistics, through program called as National Logistics Policy. Now, the government of India has also started program called as Startup India program, where the government of India is trying to promote new age businessmen to create new products for India. So under a startup, the number of companies registered in 2016 was 452. The number of companies registered under startup in 2022 is 84,000. So number of companies registered under startup has also increased. When you register yourself as a startup with Government of India, the Government of India gives you finance at low rate of interest. The Government of India also supports you by providing technology, and if you need any kind of legal help from the Government of India, help of lawyer, chartered accountant, all these things are provided by Government of India. And if you become a startup, you don't have to pay taxes normally for 3 years. In some cases 3 to 10 years also, you get a lot of benefits. So Government of India is giving those benefits to 84,000 different business enterprises in India. So guys, this was the third pillar, to promote private sector as co-partner in development. Now we come to the fourth principle of the economic reforms, which is enhancing productivity in agriculture. You know what is the economic survey saying? It says that in last 5 to 6 years, between 2017 to 2022, the rate of growth of agriculture has been really decent. It's around 4.6% per annum. Now, what are the two reasons for the growth in the agricultural sector productivity? First is good monsoon, we have been fortunate. Number two, it says because we have taken so many reforms in the field of agriculture. What are the reforms? So for example, soil health card. The Government of India is giving soil health card, and it has given soil health card to more than 23 crore farmers. So what does the soil health card tell us? Just like our report card gives us marks that in which subject, what is our performance, in which subject we need to improve. Similarly, there are different nutrients that are available in the soil. For example, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, etc., etc. All these things are mentioned in the soil health card, that what is the nutrient level in a particular soil sample and which nutrition deficiency is there, so we can put it in the soil. So it helps us to understand which fertilizer to use, how to do farming in a particular soil. So soil health card is helping the farmers. So similarly, guys, the Government of India is also promoting micro irrigation. Micro irrigation is very efficient because it reduces wastage of water. Farmer producer organization is being promoted. So for example, imagine that I am an individual farmer. If I go to a food processing industry and try to sell my crop, I will be exploited because my produce is low. I am an individual farmer. Government of India is promoting the farmers to go in groups and then sell their product. It helps to improve the bargaining position of the farmers also. That is called as farmer producer organization. ENAM means National Agricultural Market. So if I am a farmer in one part of India, so let's say I am a farmer in Punjab and I want to sell my crop in southern part of India, so I can register through ENAM portal, National Agricultural Market, and I can offer my crop over internet. And suppose somebody wants to buy my crop in southern part of India, I am in Punjab, they can buy my crop and I can sell my crop to them. I can deliver the crop to those buyers through ENAM. Similarly, the Government of India wants to promote infrastructure like warehouse, cold storage, all these things in the field of agriculture. So government has created Agriculture Infrastructure Fund by allocating a fund of rupees 1 lakh crore to develop infrastructure. So if I want to construct a warehouse or cold storage, I can take loan under the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund, and I will get the loan at low rate of interest and I can create infrastructure. Similarly, Government of India has also started Kisan Rail. Don't you think, guys, that for example, if you go to east and northeast of India, they are very good in fruits, vegetable and horticulture. The price of fruits, vegetable and horticulture in east and northeast of India is very low. So suppose 3 rupees a kg is the price of some fruits there. Don't you believe that those fruits should reach the markets in Delhi, Mumbai and Gujarat and Rajasthan, different parts of India? Government is running Kisan Rails for that purposes. So this is the fourth pillar. Now, if you remember, guys, when we started, I told you that Government of India is saying that just like in the year 2000 to 2002, when government was taking a lot of reforms, there were economic shocks because of, for example, nuclear test, etc. There were shocks. The shocks were so heavy that it did not let the benefits of economic reforms become visible immediately. The benefits started to show later on. Similarly, the government of India is saying between 2014 to 2022, we have taken so many reforms. Now, in this phase, we are experiencing some shocks, economic shocks also. And then the economic survey discusses those shocks. And then economic survey makes a point that because of these shocks, we are not able to grow to our potential. But in future, the effect of the shock will come down and we will grow. So guys, let us see what are the economic shocks that the economic survey talks about. So economic survey is currently talking about these shocks. What are the shocks? See. So guys, between 2004 to 2010, what happened across the world? Let me tell you a story. You see, between 2004 and 2010, the interest rate in USA, etc. was low. Right. And I told you when interest rate is low, the money is not invested in those countries. Relatively in countries like India, Brazil, South Africa, China, BRICS countries, the interest rate was higher. So money from US, UK started to come to India. A lot of foreign investment came in India. Now, when this situation was there in India, the banks were also giving a lot of loans. Right, and our business community, they were taking money from foreigners, they were also taking money from our financial system, and a lot of money was moving in the economy. So for example, if I am a businessman and I have taken a lot of loan from foreign country by selling bonds and from Indian banks also, so my debt is very high. So the debt to GDP ratio in 2004 was 73%, but in 2010 became 114%. So see, our debt to GDP ratio increased a lot. When our debt to GDP ratio rises, which means we have taken a lot of loan, we have to return the loan also, and we have to also pay interest rate. That is the question. Now, how will you return the loan and pay interest rate? For that, you need to generate profit in your business. So let us see if that happened or not. So our debt to GDP ratio was very high, but around 2010 to 2014, the Ministry of Environment and other ministries, they were not giving a lot of clearances to the projects. Inflation was also very high, which means those businessmen and women who had taken loan from banks, who had taken money from foreign countries to invest in India, they were not able to make profits because cost of production had increased. Right, plus environmental clearances were not coming, so project got stuck midway. So our investments started to make losses. When I am a company, I am making loss, I can't return the loan, I can't pay my EMI. So this is called as corporate crisis. Now banks have given cash to me, banks are unable to collect money from me. That is called as banking crisis. When a bank gives me money and I am not able to return the money and the rate of interest for 90 days, that money is called as non-performing asset. So on one hand, the companies are making losses. On the other hand, banks are not able to collect their money. It is creating NPA problem. Corporate crisis and banking crisis together is called as twin balance sheet crisis. So twin balance sheet crisis happened between 2010 to 14. Now, 2015 onwards, something interesting happened in India. Here we need to pay a little attention. So after 2014, it was clear that our banking system, our corporate system, our corporates, they are not making profit, banks are not getting their money. Which means if you look at the amount of money available in the economy, after 2014, it was less because banks were not giving more loans. So the credit to GDP ratio in India came down because our financial system was not healthy. It was not able to give a lot of cash. So it came down. So guys, when the credit to GDP ratio is high, that means it's a good thing also that banks are giving more cash. It will lead to more investment, but it is dangerous also because if banks give cash and companies are not able to make profit, then how will they return the money? So it's a two-edged sword. Credit to GDP ratio being high, it shows optimism in the economy. It might show good things. But if those businessmen and women who have taken loan from the bank, they are not able to return the money, then high credit to GDP ratio can also be dangerous. So in India, the credit to GDP ratio was coming down. Why? Not because of good reasons, but because of bad reasons, that our companies were not making profit and our banks had a lot of NPA, non-performing assets. Now, I want to show you something. Suppose normally our credit to GDP ratio is like this. So suppose on a graph, if I want to show you, this is our normal credit to GDP ratio line, right? Every ratio can be represented using a graph. So suppose our credit to GDP ratio is normally like this. But because of problems in corporate sector, they are suffering losses, and because banks are also suffering losses, now the banks are not giving a lot of money. So our credit to GDP ratio, suppose, has come down like this. So this, guys, is a gap between what is normally our credit to GDP ratio and this is our current position. So when there is a gap between normal and current, it is called as credit to GDP gap. Credit to GDP gap. When the credit to GDP gap is like very high, negative, etc. Now it can show two things. If the credit to GDP gap is less, that means things are normal in the economy. But if the credit to GDP gap becomes too negative, that might show that the confidence in the economy is very low. There is negativity all around. That is why banks are not giving credit and people are not taking credit. So negative credit to GDP gap might also show that things are not very okay in the economy. And you know what happened after 2015, the credit to GDP gap in India was minus 25%, which means huge dip. It shows lack of confidence in the economy. But generally, if the credit to GDP gap is low, so for example, normally, if this is the credit to GDP, normally this is the credit to GDP line, which means normally people are taking 10 crore rupees from the bank and GDP is 100 crore. So if 10 crore is the credit and 100 crore is the GDP of India, this is called credit to GDP. Right, suppose this is that line. But suppose that because of some economic situation, the credit to GDP line is here. It's not a problem because it's slightly up, it's okay. It shows good things, that there is optimism in the economy. If it becomes little low also, it means that okay, there is no problem. But if it becomes too low, that shows pessimism in the economy, which actually started to happen. So the government of India says that this is not the end. Our credit to GDP line became very low in India, like minus 25%. And then around 2018, India suffered from a big crisis in the financial market called as IL and FS crisis, which I'm going to explain now. These are the crises that we face. So let me explain to you what is IL and FS crisis. Guys, so before I explain IL and FS crisis to you, let me tell you what this company is called. It's Infrastructure Finance and Leasing Services, IL and FS. Now, what is this company? So guys, suppose we have to construct this road. The government of India many a times did not have the cash to construct this road. So in 1987, you see, 1987, Central Bank, UTI, HDFC, etc. They came together and they started a company called IL and FS. This had the government of India's backing. It was a non-banking financial company, NBFC. Why was it created? It was created so that it could give cash finance for construction of the road, maintenance of the road. That's it. The only job of IL and FS was to act like a financer, to provide finance to those people who wanted to construct road and maintain road. That's it. Its job was not to construct road initially. But later on, ILFS diversified its activities and it also started to construct roads. It also started to actively get engaged in the construction of road, both financing and construction. Now, in many of the projects where it had put its cash, many of the road projects could not be completed. Many of the infrastructure projects could not be completed. It got delayed because of environmental clearances or inflation, those kind of things. So what happened? There are many people who had invested money in ILFS. So suppose ILFS is constructing a road. In that project, suppose LIC, mutual funds, banks and financial institutions of India have given money to ILFS. That road could not be completed. So ILFS would not be able to return the money. That is what happened in 2018. ILFS took money from many institutions like LIC, mutual fund, etc. And ILFS could not return the money because project could not be completed. This led to deep crisis in India, and the health of our financial institutions became very poor. They were already poor, right? And they became even more poor because of twin balance sheet crisis. They were already in bad shape. But as we were trying to recover, ILFS crisis happened and our condition became bad. So credit to GDP ratio became very low in India at that time. Now, what did the government of India do to improve the banking system? To improve the banking system, the government of India started a program called as strategic debt restructuring. Let me tell you what is strategic debt restructuring. Now, suppose guys, I am a businessman and I have taken money from a bank. Now, I am not able to return the money of the bank. So that money is called non-performing asset. Now, government of India or RBI gave permission to the bank that whatever cash the bank has given to me, that cash can be converted into equity shares and it can be sold. I'll give you an example. So suppose this is a bank and this is a businessman. The bank has given cash to the businessman, but businessman is able to return the cash. Suppose the amount of cash is 10 crore. This businessman has a company. So this bank can convert 10 crore into shares, and this share can be sold in the market. Anyone who buys the share becomes the owner of this company. This is called as debt restructuring. Now similarly, there is something called as asset quality review. Under asset quality review, Reserve Bank of India told all the banks very boldly that all the banks of India have to tell Reserve Bank of India their real magnitude of non-performing assets, because banks were hiding these figures. I'll give you an example. Suppose I'm State Bank of India. I have given loan to a businessman and the businessman is not returning the loan to me. That is called NPA, non-performing assets. Now, I am hiding it from RBI because if I tell it to RBI, RBI will put punishments over me, will penalize me. I want to save myself, so I'm hiding it. One day, this NPA will become so big that I will become sick. So Reserve Bank of India told all the banks of India, don't hide your NPA. Under asset quality review, Reserve Bank of India told all the banks that by next 12 months, you have to tell us honestly what is your total level of NPA, right? So this was done. Mission Indradhanush. Now, public sector banks like SBI, etc., they were also in a bad shape because their money was also gone, right? So the government of India or RBI, they launched a project called as Mission Indradhanush, which was done to revive the public sector banks in India. Similarly, guys, there is something called as prompt corrective action. So suppose I am a bank, my NPA has increased. People have taken loan and they are not returning my loan. So Reserve Bank of India identifies such banks and puts them under the list called as prompt corrective action list. If my name is there in the list, if I am SBI, then Reserve Bank of India says I cannot open a new branch. I can also not give too much loan beyond a limit, and I can also not recruit new people. So these kind of actions are taken against me so that I can become healthy again. My expenses are reduced. This is called prompt corrective action. This was also done in India. All these steps or banking reforms were undertaken in India, which means that now the government of India is saying, let me show you this, which means the government of India is saying that just like between 2000 to 2002, we were undertaking reforms, but crisis was also happening. But the benefit of these reforms was showed in 2003 to 8. Similarly, government is saying that between 2014 to 2022, we took a lot of reforms, but crisis happened. Now, this crisis is both internal and external. I explained to you the crisis, ILFS crisis, credit to GDP ratio, all these crises is happening in India. So the government of India is saying that, but because we have taken so much of reforms, so in future, when the effect of crisis comes down, our GDP will increase. So the situation between 2000 to 2002, 2003 to 2008 is similar to situation between 2014 and 2020. Just like in 2003 to 2008, we got the benefits. So similarly, the government is saying in future, we will get the benefits. Let us see. So, in the economic survey, the government has compared the phase 1998 to 2002 because why? Because during this phase, two things were happening. India was undertaking reforms, plus we had shock. Both were going on together. But who dominated? The shock dominated. And after 2003, we got positive benefits. Similarly, between 2012 to 22, we have undertaken so many reforms, plus shock is there, like COVID shock, etc. These shocks are dominating us today, but in future, the government is saying after 2023, we will get positive results. So government is comparing these two. And to compare them, the government has given this chart. We have already discussed this chart, guys, through that story which I told you, that between 1998 to 2002, what are the good things that we did? See, all these FRBM, privatization, etc. And between 2014 to 2022, what are the good things we did and what are the shocks? We have already discussed this through a story. So the story which I was telling you since last few hours, so this story was related to this table only. Now, the government of India then has asked a question. In the economic survey, there is a question which says, will the economy achieve and sustain a steady growth rate once the one-off shock recede? So once the shocks are gone from the economy, is the economy going to come back and become a full-grown economy and achieve its targets? So the economic survey says yes. Once the shocks go down, the effect of the shock goes down, the economic growth will be revived because we have some growth magnets. Growth magnet means those things which we have created through reforms, they are going to increase the GDP of India. So what are the growth magnets of India which will increase our growth? These are the growth magnets. So economic survey says that there are 5 growth magnets that India has. First is called healthy financial system. Second is digital revolution, third is skill, fourth is global supply chain, and fifth is governance reforms. We are going to discuss them now. So guys, the first growth magnet or growth enabler is called healthy financial system. See, so the government of India is saying that since we have taken so many steps like asset quality review, prompt corrective action, so government of India is saying our NPA problem is coming down now. That's correct, because if you look at the non-performing assets of banks, it is coming down. So the government of India has said that yes, our banks are improving. Now this economic survey was written before the Hindenburg and Adani controversy came out in public. So let's see how actually the banking system performs in the next few months. Now the government of India says that our corporate profit has increased because the government of India is giving quick clearances, environmental clearances, etc. Because of that, the projects are being completed in time. So yes, our financial system is healthy. Now, second, the government of India says we have promoted digital revolution, which means that Jan Dhan, Aadhaar and Mobile Jam Trinity, the number of bank accounts have increased. Our companies are registered through GST portal, which means we know that how many companies are paying taxes, which are not paying taxes. So when the company pays taxes through GST, it helps in the formalization of the economy, which means it helps us to register the companies also. So we would know the details. It will help us to give social security benefit to workers also. So right, it has improved formalization. Also, if banks know my history, like where I'm spending money, my details are there through bank account, that means if the bank wants to give money to me as loan, since my credit history is there with the bank, so it becomes easy for the bank to give loan also, because my spending pattern and everything is known to the bank. So digitization helps the bank to decide which customer is risky, which is not risky. That is also a benefit. We know that we are the country which is having a lot of demographic dividend because of population. So we are number one in the world in terms of population. So government of India says that we have so many skill building programs. If right skill is provided to people, which is required by the industry, then India can take advantage of demographic dividend. So guys, when are we able to take advantage of demographic dividend? When we provide the skill to the people which is required to get jobs. So skill and job should go together. Global supply chain. What did COVID teach us? COVID taught entire world that don't depend on only one country like China for your raw material and for your manufacturing. Because if something goes wrong in the factories of China, your manufacturing will also suffer. So, example, semiconductor chips. There was shortage of semiconductor chip. across the world. Similarly, there was shortage of medical equipment and medicines. So now the entire world is looking for other suppliers of raw material and finished goods, and India is projecting itself as a big supplier of both raw material and finished goods. So global supply chain will help us to become more powerful. Governance reform. So guys, the government of India is saying that just like we are removing unnecessary rules, regulations and paperwork, it will continue in future. The government of India says, however, that the state governments of India have to do power sector reforms. You know, our power sector companies, they are suffering a lot of losses. So the central government is saying that the state governments must take steps so that our power sector companies, they also survive and their loss can be reduced. Because in India there is power loss, there is power theft, all these things need to be controlled. Now government of India is saying that skill and education must be created in such a way that our students and young minds can get employment. So there must be partnership between industry and skill training institutes. The government of India also says that we have to focus more on renewable energy in future, and we have also to adopt healthy lifestyle, because in India the problem is not just communicable disease but non-communicable and lifestyle diseases, like for example there is a lot of heart attacks, obesity, all these problems happening. So we have to control our lifestyle also. Then the government of India says that there are many public sector companies who have got extra land, extra building, they can put it on rent. It will help the companies to survive. It will also reduce the burden on the government. So we should use the monetization model. If I have extra property, put it on rent, use the money to make myself more healthy. This can also be done. MSME reforms. Government of India says that micro, small and medium enterprises, it should be registered more money should be given to them. If they need more raw material can be given to them. So it will help them to become better and more profitable. So these are our growth magnets, or these can also be called as the growth enablers, which means if we follow these 6 growth enablers, our GDP is bound to increase in future. Now guys, based on this lecture, let us discuss some MCQs and see if we can apply the knowledge that we have gained from this chapter to answer questions in UPSC. So guys, let's start with the first question. It says, which of the following can be called as non-debt creating capital inflows? So if I'm a company and if I am selling bonds in a foreign country and getting cash, I have to return that cash. That is called as external commercial borrowing. So that is debt creating. But if I'm a company, and suppose I'm Tata's, Mr. Bill Gates is coming and investing in my company. Right. So he is investing in my company by buying equity shares, 12%, 13% equity shares. When somebody buys equity shares of a company like Tata's, I don't have to return the money. So that is called as foreign direct investment. So foreign direct investment is non-debt creating, but external commercial borrowing are debt creating. So the answer is 1A, right? Which of the following steps were taken as a part of new economic policy? Under new economic policy, the government did not promote monetization. Monetization means if I have some machines or building, I can put it on rent. But under new economic policy, privatization was promoted, disinvestment was promoted, not monetization. So first is incorrect. Exchange rate was made flexible and allowed to depreciate. Yes, the RBI allowed our exchange rate, the rate between rupee and dollar, etc., to be determined by market forces of demand and supply. So it is correct. The rupee was made fully convertible on capital account. No. Capital account convertibility means that if somebody wants to invest in India and buy bonds and equity shares, they can easily convert rupee into dollar, dollar into rupee without restriction. That is incorrect. Restrictions are there. So third is incorrect. We have full convertibility in current account, not on capital account. So the correct answer is B, only 2. The government has launched the reforms for New India, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikaas. Which of the following principles are being used there? Creating public goods, yes. Adopting trust-based governance, yes. Co-partnering with private sector, yes. Improving industrial productivity, no. The fourth principle is improving agricultural productivity. So answer is 1, 2 and 3. Which of the following schemes is or are meant for disbursement of credit to MSMEs? Which means under which scheme are we giving cash to MSMEs? Udyam, no. Udyam is a portal for registration of MSMEs, not to give them cash. Swanidhi is a scheme where we give cash to street vendors. It is not for all the MSMEs. It is only for street vendors. So the answer is none of these. With reference to National Single Window Clearance System, Consider the following statements. It facilitates regulatory approval and services related to investment. It acts as digital repository for storing documents. It is managed by National Payment System Corporation. So see, for example, under this system, the government of India gives clearances online through one portal only, and it also provides depository services. But it is not managed by National Payment Corporation of India, it is managed by DPIIT. Right? So the first is correct and the second is correct. Third is not correct. With reference to insolvency and bankruptcy code, which of the following statements are correct? So we understand that under insolvency and bankruptcy code, both creditor and debtor can initiate the process. So in case of default, both can apply for resolution, correct? The National Company Law Tribunal acts as adjudicating authority for resolution of partnership and individual. No, they act as adjudicating authority only for corporates. For partnership and individuals, there is debt recovery tribunal. That's different. So second is incorrect. The decision regarding liquidation of defaulting company is taken by the insolvency professional. No, insolvency professional run the company during the process of insolvency. This decision is taken by committee of creditors, COC. So third option is incorrect. Second is also incorrect. Only one is correct. A is correct. Consider the following statements regarding macroeconomic scenario of an economy. Let's see this. A lower credit to GDP gap indicates resilience or ability of the economy to pay back the debt. Yes, if credit to GDP ratio is low, that means if the national income of India is 100 crore, but the credit by bank, the banks have given loan of 10 crore only to business community, etc. 10 crore only. So it means that repayment is easy. Such an economy finds the repayment easy. So low credit to GDP gap indicates resilience of the economy. Yes. Now, a high credit to GDP ratio means aggressive loan by banks. Now, yes, it also means aggressive loan because high credit means more money has been given by bank to the economy. So second is also correct. Third is high basal gap might mean a high risk associated with higher lending to business and household over long period. You see, remember I told you that suppose that in the economy banks are giving loan to people and our GDP is 100 crore and the loan that banks give is roughly around 10 crore. So this is credit to GDP. Suppose this line shows our normal credit to GDP over a period of time. Credit to GDP over a period of time. But suppose as this says a high basal gap might mean a high risk. Now suppose that currently our banks are giving more cash. Earlier they were giving 10 crore, now they are giving 40 crore cash. So which means that this will be our line. Which means that from normal we have gone higher. Now this gap, I told you that is called as credit to GDP gap. It is also called as basal gap. It has another name, it is called basal gap. So when it is too high, it can also mean that there is a high risk because banks are giving too much cash, and if those industries which are taking cash, they are not able to make profit, how will they return the money of the bank? So it can be very dangerous also. So the answer is all the three are correct, 1, 2 and 3. So guys, all the best for your preparations and see you very soon with the third lecture in the series of economic survey lectures. Thank you.